Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Diversity at the Institutes. Today's topic is neurodiversity, and I am so excited to have with me three subject matter experts on the topic of neurodiversity. I am Amy Cole-Smith, the Director of Diversity at the Institutes, and these three subject matter experts are going to tell you what they know about neurodiversity, their experience with it, and how neurodiverse population can aid in risk management and insurance. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have with us Mike, Stephanie, and Don. I'm going to start with you, Mike. Can you just give us a quick little intro about yourself, and then we'll go from Stephanie, then Don.
Thanks, Amy. I'm Mike Egan. I'm currently the executive director and founder of the Independence Hub. And what the Independence Hub does is tries to improve outcomes for neurodivergent people that, one, are already in the insurance industry, and then two, to recruit more into the industry. I have ADHD, and probably anyone would have told you that, but it took until COVID came for me to personally slow down long enough to actually realize, despite the fact that I'd been taking my children to these appointments, I'd been medicating my children, I'd been doing all of this stuff, but I never realized that there were things about adult ADHD that mattered. And I can tell you that all the people that I talk to who find out as adults that they have ADHD, like, the whole world makes sense, because you're like, this is why. Oh my God, I thought I was just a weirdo. So, and I am, which is cool, right? So I have been just happy as hell since I found out I have ADHD and founded the Independence Hub. My background is selling technology to insurance executives, and what I'm trying to do is to leverage those same relationships to get them to change the way the industry hires, recruits, and retains neurodivergent talent.
Thank you, Mike. Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I currently work with American Equity Underwriters. I'm in the underwriting department. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and I am also ADHD. And I absolutely relate to Mike, because finding out as an adult, I was in my mid-20s when I found out, and as soon as I was medicated, I was just blown away. I asked my doctor, I said, is this what it's like to be normal? Because I've never felt this level of clarity before, and I don't think I realized what I was going without until that happened. So I absolutely relate to that. But I've been advocating for ADHD and neurodivergency ever since, doing the best I can, trying to do my own research, and just trying to promote awareness and acceptance for it.
Thank you, Stephanie. And last but not least, Don.
Trying to get off mute. Hi, my name is Don, and I work for Liberty Mutual, where I'm the manager of Understanding What Matters, doing all thing employee sentiment analytics, and I am a parent of a neurodivergent child. He has autism, and I've just been an advocate for educational diversity. There's not one way to learn. Different people learn differently, and just really trying to understand how people learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing a little bit about your background. So makes me more excited about this conversation. So Mike, we will start with you. And of course, everyone feel free to jump in when you need to. So Mike, in your own words, what does neurodiversity mean to you? And why such an interest in this topic? And you kind of alluded to it during your intro.
Yeah, so did Dawn too. It's just the different way of thinking. And I kind of got into it a weird way. You know, I talked about my children, but believe it or not, I was trying to become a better golfer. Like, I was in a fantasy world that I was going to become a scratch golfer. I'm like a 6 handicap, but I was going through all of these mental exercises and studying the discipline of performing, right? And I'd played basketball. I knew what it was like to be in the zone, but that thought and that realization that different brain chemistry and that one's brain chemistry can impact one's performance so much made me just more interested in how the brain works, even from doing presentations with my customers and trying to activate the left side of the brain, because the stuff we talk about is boring. I mean, you can only watch so many fake insurance policies be entered into a system and your brain is going to blow up. I've seen so many rate changes, you wouldn't have mattered. So like engaging people, it just made so much sense to me. And then when I always knew about the talent gap that we were facing in insurance. So neurodiversity to me means just a different way of looking at the same problems, and that we have a lot of the same problems in the world that we're still struggling with. And that if we can just figure out how to get everybody at the table with something to say and the ability to listen, that problems will just be solved. So it's hopeful. So neurodiversity to me kind of means hope in different things and non-confrontational too. That's my favorite thing about neurodiversity is there's my group, we help veterans. So people with PTSD and people with traumatic brain injuries, they are neurodivergent too, and they're part of who we need to help.
That's really good. That's really good. And I love how you included the veteran aspect of it, because that is a population that, you know, tends to be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for that. Stephanie, what are some common myths and misconceptions concerning neurodiversity?
So I heard the misconception that it's only related to autism, and you know, autism obviously is a very important part of it, but it's not just autism and ADHD, you know, there's just dyslexia, dyspraxia, all of that. And I think that there's just a wide range of neurological differences that fall under neurodiversity that may not even be under that label yet as well. But I think it's important to know too that no two people with the same diagnosis will present the same. As far as, you know, behavior, personality, habits, all of that, you know. And I think that it's also a misconception that people with neurodivergency are of lower intelligence, and I just find that just absolutely false. So.
That's really good. You're definitely right. You know, it won't present itself the same because, you know, sometimes people look for like the way people, you know, like they look for like physical, you know, physical attributes. So I think that's a very valid point.
Well, and from an HR or even a DE&I perspective, there's no one solution to this, right? So there's not a neurodivergent friendly package or that it's a collection. That's what one of the things I've been trying to get across in some of my messaging, I'm so glad you said it, Stephanie, is that it's more of a collection than it is a group, and that it's the key is to treat people as individuals. So absolutely. I love that, Stephanie.
I think another misconception is that it's not real.
Yeah.
Because you can't see it, and because the person is kind of normal, and I use that in quotes specifically, that it's not really real and it's not really something that affects them or impacts them. And, you know, what Stephanie was saying about intelligence definitely resonated with me, because it's like, we oftentimes, if someone is different from us, we're fearful of that. If people are not kind of like what we have in our brain as like quote unquote normal, we just think it's worse and it's other. And I think that strikes neurodiverse people especially hard because they appear normal. Again, keeping with those air quotes. And so I feel like oftentimes it can be very isolating too. Internally, you're like, you know, while people say that I should be normal, but I feel different. Like, is it just me? I think Mike said, you know, he was asking himself if he was weird, but, you know, I'm a self-professed weirdo too. And so I think weird people should rule the world. But I really just think that the misconceptions are people, it's not real. And I think that's really difficult for neurodiverse people to deal with.
That is true. And I love the discussion, like where it's going so far. You know, like you said, people look at it like it's not real. And then we compare normal to what, you know, we feel is not normal, when in actuality, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't feel anybody is normal. Everybody has something. So, which, Don, you know, what you were saying, besides, you know, like people who are physical and, you know, normalism, what kinds of challenges do neurodivergent people experience? What are some of their strengths, and what are their lives like daily lives like?
So my dad was dyslexic. I'm slightly dyslexic. And he had poor grades all throughout school. Now, you know, as he would tell, he wasn't necessarily as interested in school, wanted to hang out with his friends and stuff like that, but he had a difficult time learning. But he was also a hustler. And so he figured out as an adult how to do things. He never got more than an associate's degree, and yet worked for a chemical company. Back when in the 80s, where they had these big old circuit breaker boards, and he has a US patent. He figured out how to do something. He owned a bunch of different businesses, and was able to, as an adult, figure out how he learned, which was different than kind of like how school was taught. And so the challenges he faced was just kind of, you know, not thinking of himself as a smart person, and not being considered a smart person, even though he had a lot of potential. And as an adult, he was able to kind of realize that potential. But I know there are probably so many people who, because they don't learn the way that we traditionally teach, think of themselves as not smart. And so the challenge is, you know, for neurodiverse people, is not knowing what their full potential is, and people not being able to see it, and people not giving them an opportunity to showcase their skills in a different way.
That's good. That's good. And kudos to your dad. That's really good though. Very good. Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, but I forgot it. It was
That's
really
great.
good too. I'll think of. Oh, I know what it was. So Dawn is talking about one part of the thing, do I belong, right? And not being able to get the chance. The other side of that coin is the masking side of it, where you do, and the imposter syndrome that you get. So like, if you can be because like, I can pass like nobody's business. I have a whole golf operation I run, you know, but the doubt that you have in yourself, that kind of imposter syndrome, that I've been at 125% of quota for 4 years, but it's a mistake because I don't do it like everyone else. And I don't do this, this, and this. I have to do it like this. So there must be something wrong. God, I hope no one finds out. And that's real. And I didn't realize how real it was, once again, until I realized. And because I have ADHD, I get into stuff. And once I get a hold of something, like, I'll learn as much as possible about it, which is brings to the other point that Stephanie was making. Like, I'm not medicated for ADHD, and I have tried to be on the medication, but it slows me down too much. So for me, and this is exactly what everyone's saying, everyone has to figure out what's right for them. For me, my world is, okay, just accept who you are, man, and ride the train. Now, I'm older and my kids are gone, so my career isn't, I can take a lot more chances than I could say at 32 or 33 when I was starting out, because now I have enough knowledge and people in contact, so people know me enough. So I do have a little bit of a safety net. But being yourself is hard stuff, boy, and then owning. So I would say that is that was my comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephanie, in your opinion, what are some examples of casual ableism and also systematic ableism?
So just please excuse me for looking down at my notes, but I wanted to make sure that I did this justice and I didn't want to forget anything, just in case. And I am absolutely a note taker through and through. So for casual ableism, I put that getting comments like, maybe if you applied yourself more, or really, like, as soon as you tell someone your diagnosis, they're like, really? Like, they're just shocked. And isn't that kind of thing overdiagnosed already? Insisting on eye contact, insisting that neurodivergent differences can be outgrown. I don't know about you guys, but as I get older, it feels like it gets worse. I feel like I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum as far as ADHD compared to Mike, who, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, you seem very high energy. And I was basically lethargic without my medication. I mean, I was just no energy, no motivation. I was very reserved. This honestly would have been impossible for me to hold a conversation because I would just be observing and listening or just quiet. And the medication just kind of helped me grow, you know, and, you know, I'm not saying that medication's for everyone because obviously it isn't, you know, but you've got to find what works for you. And the medication only helps so much and you have to work on some other things too. But I think that casual ableism is a real issue because a lot of people are so anti-medication and especially anti-ADHD medication.
For parents too, right? That's the thing. Like, it's an excuse for you. And
Yeah.
my wife did a spectacular job because I was the one in my family who at first who was like, these kids don't need medication. My dad's a football coach, so you know, these kids don't need medication. They just need a little more. And that was wrong. And so it's hard.
Hey, kudos for, you know, admitting that, you know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are guilty of it. My parents for sure were. And my dad was absolutely the same way. He was like, it's not real. I don't think that you even need to get tested, all of this stuff. And then a few years ago, he got tested and lo and behold, he's ADHD too, but he presents differently than I do. So he didn't think it was the same. And he did apologize. He was like, I owe you an apology. And he said that it was the same way. It was like putting on glasses for the first time.
So, and I don't want to hijack this because it's such a good point though. So Duke has, because what I understand is it presents very differently, ADHD does in women than it does in men. And that Duke has a special, like their specialty is women and ADHD. So you might want to follow up with them.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for your answer. And you are correct. I've seen it with I have a 6-year-old, and I have seen it with some of the members of his classroom where, you know, you don't have someone who is a subject matter expert, you know, in neurodiversity. So I've heard some of the, you know, the teachers say, well, you just need to pay attention more, focus, you know, and it's like, it's probably a little bit deeper than that. So I appreciate you saying that. And also I appreciate you, you know, being on this panel. I definitely appreciate that. So, Mike, neurodiversity.
Yes.
An invisible illness. And so we'll talk about invisible illness. And invisible illness is any medical condition that impacts a person's life, but not immediately apparent to others.
Yeah.
It includes chronic or recurrent conditions like sickle cell, diabetes, depression, arthritis, so on and so on. So about 10% of Americans have non-visible medical conditions that qualifies for an invisible disability. Yet, in the absence of visible evidence, these conditions are often belittled, ignored, or trivialized. Why do you believe society trivializes invisible conditions, and what actions can we take to prevent this from happening? And it kind of almost goes off of what Stephanie was talking about earlier.
Yeah. I think that people do what's easiest and that and I think you said it before too, Stephanie, or maybe it was you, Dawn, about the other. And what's easy in life is and we're built like that, right? From evolution, that we stick together in little groups to make ourselves safe and feel good. And I just think that this becomes another mechanism for people to find others and things and to make themselves feel better. So to me, the answer is the same answer to every problem, which is every person just needs to be the best person they are for themselves and just do the best you can and be as happy as you can and be a piece of joy that moves around the world. So I don't think you can change people's minds any other way, because they're always going to find something that is different or other.
Totally. I might get on a soapbox with this answer, Amy. So bear with me, because I think part of the reason why it's trivialized is because I feel like it's not as easy to have empathy for something you can't see. And it's hard to have sympathy for something you can't see. If somebody, like, breaks their foot and you see them in a cast, you can have some sympathy for that person. And maybe you can get some empathy if you broke something before. But when you have an invisible illness and the person appears normal, I mean, I'm going to be using air quotes a lot today, then I think it's really hard to put yourself into their shoes. The flip side is it's hard for that person who is neurodiverse to put themselves into your shoes, because they haven't experienced the world in the way that quote unquote normal, or I'll use a different phrase, typically developing people have experienced the world. And so it's almost like you're speaking two languages, but there's no translator. And so I think that's why we trivialize things. And to Mike's point about it's like easier, and Mike, you also said earlier, people mask, is that everybody kind of wants to they don't want to stand out for something bad. Nobody wants to stand out for like having an illness or disease, because you don't want pity. And and so I feel like that's part of the reason why we trivialize things today, is because we can't have sympathy or empathy for this thing we can't really see.
So I would like to chip in on this as well, if I can. Something that I've always said when this comes up and it starts to get questioned is, I have never actually seen with my own eyes my brain. I've never seen it, but it exists. It's there. And the same thing with all of my other organs. They exist. Your organs can get sick or they can have limitations just like anything else, and your brain is an organ. So why is that any different than any of your other organs? You know what I mean? And usually that kind of gets people to open their eyes a little bit, and they're like, wow, I've never thought of it that way, but that's one of those things, like just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
That's really good. I love that analogy. That's really good, because a lot of that, any type of organ, I mean, that something can be wrong. That can start off in the womb. And,
Exactly.
that's really, I'm going to steal that, Stephanie. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
steal that. That's a really good. That's a really good analogy. And I appreciate you for saying that. That's an eye opener. That's really good. So Don, do you, as an insurance professional, do you see movement within the HR profession to revamp their practices when it comes to neurodiversity? And also, what about hidden discrimination in hiring practices?
And again, my experience here probably is limited. I don't know, maybe not. But I would say I see the spirit of a desire to incorporate practices that are more inclusive of neurodiversity, but the execution, I'm not sure if we're quite there yet, because I just think that there's a lack of understanding. When you say neurodiverse, it's a whole lot of things on that spectrum, and how it impacts people is very different. I mean, do I qualify as a neurodiverse person because I'm slightly dyslexic? I don't know. But I think HR departments are really trying to be more inclusive and listen to the experiences of people, and then also trying to update their practices to meet those challenges. But I don't know if we're ever going to be exhaustive in terms of the tools that we have. But what I hope that we can create is an environment where if you're someone and you feel like you learn a little bit differently, you can speak up, and someone will advocate for you and help provide materials that support you. And I think companies are definitely moving in that direction, but I definitely think we're just scratching the surface there.
That's good. And it's just what you said reminds me of, when I believe it was Mike who brought up, wearing the mask. And, sometimes when you apply to some of these jobs, they will ask you certain questions. And, sometimes that mask will have to come on because it's like, should I put down that I have, for example, PTSD? Should I put that down? Will they not hire me because I have that? And even with that, do they have the right resources for me? So that's actually a really good point. So thank you for that, Don. Mike.
So I want to raise my hand because that's exactly what we're trying to do. So that's exactly what we're trying to do at the Independence Hub. And what I would say, Dawn, is you are spot on with what you said, and especially because I just found out early on this call that you work at Liberty Mutual. And Liberty has, the CEO of Liberty, his son has autism. And they have, and are you aware of this? They have a thing with Mass General and the Aspire program. So Liberty is a leader in this. And I was talking with Kara Shapolsky. Do you know Kara? I'll put you two in contact together. So she is leading their neurodiversity initiative at Liberty. And she told me, because I said the same thing to her, she told me that they have not been hiring as much as they wanted to, and that she said exactly what you said. We want to do this stuff. We think we kind of know how to do it, but we just don't know how to get from A to B. And part of the reason is, and I have been selling technology to these risk-averse executives for years, is they don't want to be the first to do it, and they want to be able to have somebody else come along with them on the journey, specifically the HR people, because as much as the HR people try to do the right thing, they are not incentivized to take chances. They do not want to be the person who was responsible for hiring the really strange guy who writes really good code, because that's going to be blamed on the HR person. They're not going to see that the weirdness comes with the code. It's a package. And that instead of, because what happens in that case, the HR person gets in trouble when actually they hit a home run and nobody knows that. So that's why fundamentally what we're trying to do is to identify the 3, 4, 5 leaders in insurance who are willing to say, I want to do a pilot. I want to prove that this thing works. And then I want to bring the HR people where it's fair to them, where we say, hey, we need to look at the whole way that we're incentivizing this entire hiring process. The hiring process is broken. We can say it or not. It's broken for neurodivergent people. It's broken for neurotypical people. We have a talent crisis in the industry, so we're not hiring enough of the right people. That's exactly right. Yes, that's why we did it, and it was so cool, Don, that you are at Liberty, and you said the exact thing that Kara did, the exact thing. And and the other thing is, so the autism, when we talked earlier about autism being the dominant one, that is because a lot of the programs started it was autism at work. So SAP, they were all the leaders of this, what's now neurodiversity at work, in the roundtable that Microsoft has all the assets for. Well, that started at autism at work. And actually Judy Riley at UConn was the one who convinced them to make it bigger than autism at work and to make it neurodiversity at work.
That's good. Thank you, Mike. Also, you're up for the next question.
Oh boy.
So, and it kind of goes along with what you said. What are some specific actions that can be taken in order to be more inclusive for neurodivergent people?
Yeah, so if you look at what the problem is, the first problem is the way that talent is identified. There's all of this automated kind of sifting process, and that sifting process by its nature is excluding the entire neurodivergent community. So we need to get out of that kind of recruiting event. And then in the assessment, so when we're doing interviews, instead of open-ended conversations, they need to be more skill-based interviews. And then the other thing that needs to happen is there needs to be a mentorship program. So that in the example that Dawn gave before of, I need help, I need somewhere to go, a lot of times the place to go is in your own company. Well, if you're having problems with your own company, you may not be do that. So if there's a third party organization that sponsors the mentorship group, and that's what we're doing, and I'm hoping I can convince you two to become that first membership group that we're putting in. But we're going to have those mentorship relationships that are outside of the the enterprise. And then the fourth thing is to have managers have a base level of neurodiversity training, right? So as part of their just basic training, they understand that there's this kinds of, this is what it is, this is what to look for. Quite frankly, this is what the ADA says that you have to do. And here are the things that, believe it or not, you maybe have to face these things and put in more formal accommodations. But just a very basic level, like 1 or 2 hours, and then the mentorship program. Those are really the 4 concrete things. And I get those things from Judy at UConn.
Good.
I didn't come up with them on my own, trust me.
Well, they sound exciting. Stephanie, how does neurodiversity relate to other forms of diversity, in your opinion?
In my opinion, there's no one like type of race, culture, age, sexual orientation, all of that. You know, none of it is ever going to look the same. No one person has the same life, habit, behavior, all of that. You know, so neurodiversity is no different in regards to that aspect. There's no one type of brain or mind that is the same, functions the same, behaves the same. So I think that that's the best way to look at it. You know, they kind of go hand in hand. I think that the word neurodiversity is the perfect, you know, combination of words to describe what it is.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I totally agree with that. You know, the relatability of that neurodiversity and diversity. At the end of the day, everyone is different in their own way. Somebody has some diverse aspect to them. And I think people tend to forget that because they just look at the outside, you know, but everyone has a bit of diversity to them. And although I have enjoyed this discussion, this is our last question, which I want all 3 of you to answer actually, but I will start with Don. What is the most important takeaway that you would like for everyone watching to know about neurodiversity?
I think that, you know, to the point you were just making and Stephanie was just making is people are different. And what I would say is when you encounter a person, just listen. Really listen, let them tell their story, let them tell you what works for them versus trying to imprint upon them what you think works for a majority. It may work for a majority, fine, but the person in front of you is an individual. And even if it worked for 99.999% of all people, and this one person is different, the way to be really effective, inclusive in your thinking is to really expand your mind that there's not a right or wrong way. There's just a way that's more effective for different people. And so that's what I would say to people is just, it's okay that you may have been considered normal your entire life. You may not have any people in your life who are different. And so you may not have a lot of perspective in that space. That's okay, that's fine. But when you encounter a person who does seem different from you, just listen.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Don. Stephanie?
I think the most important takeaway for me is acceptance over awareness. You know, you hear mental health awareness, neurodiversity awareness, everything. And the thing is I think that that's great, but we can make everyone aware all day long. But I don't think we'll see an overall positive impact until it's actually just widely accepted. And, you know, we've talked about how society and workplaces and stuff are starting to make that climb to make that possible. And it's just kind of slowly happening. And, you know, I don't expect the traditional workplace to change overnight, just like Rome was not built overnight, you know. But I think the more that we talk about it and the more that we have this conversation and have safe spaces to have conversations like these, the more it will become normalized and more accepted overall. And I think that that's just the overall goal.
That's good. Awareness over, or acceptance over awareness. That's good.
Yeah.
And Mike?
I would say that for insurance, adopting neurodiversity is a business imperative. The neurodivergent people are going to find jobs because we got skills. We can adapt to anything. you throw something in front of us, we're going to figure it out. The insurance industry has had an unfettered access to a lot of neurodivergent people, specifically in actuarial science. And those people are now being poached by other industries. So the insurance industry can decide to get its act together and be able to do real innovation and be able to staff all of these jobs that are open in the STEM skill area by just doing a few simple things. And they're either going to do it or not.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us on this webinar concerning neurodiversity. Thank you to Mike, Stephanie, and Don for sharing your personal experiences as well as your subject matter expertise. I'm sure that everyone watching learned a lot. I've learned a lot just from speaking with three of you, so I really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Amy Cole-Smith, Director of Diversity at the Institutes, and we will see you next time on our next webinar for Diversity at the Institutes. Thank you all so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.